I was on a run and I felt the sudden urge to make this video. And I've been meaning to make this video for about a year, but I haven't because talking about anxiety and traumatic things that you went through can bring back emotions, right? So I want to tell you about how my struggle through anxiety and obsessive compulsive thinking and my intrusive thoughts. So I wrote down some notes. I made this video and it was 30 minutes long, and then I realized I didn't hit some key points that I wanted to make. So let's go. I'm gonna tell you basically like the timeline. I made notes. Okay, so it started in high school. I got back from vacation with my friends and I was out to dinner with my parents, and I saw a family that I knew, and I knew some of their kids had dealt with suicidal thoughts. That's the basis of all my intrusive thoughts is suicidal thoughts, which is my biggest fear in life. So I saw that family and I was just like, I just saw them, whatever. I got home that night, I was laying in my bed. I think I had school the next day, back from winter break. And I remember looking at my fan and I was like, what if I ever had thoughts like that? And that scared me to death. And I started freaking out, and I was like almost hyperventilating, and I was shaking, and I was just like, what is happening to me? I've never experienced a panic attack ever. So I went down to my parents and I told them, and I was like, I don't know, I had this thought. And they were like, well, like, do you want that to happen to you? And I was like, no, I just I don't know why I thought it, and like, why did I think it? Do I want it to happen to me? If I had the thought, I was so scared of it. So I was shaking and I was holding on to my parents, and I went up to my room and I was just like, I need to open my Bible. I just need to read my Bible. So I read my Bible, and my mom, I think, slept with me that night because I was just I was scared to be alone. And the next day I woke up and I was still distraught from it, and I was just scared of it. And that was kind of the start of everything. And my second half of senior year was not the easiest. During that time, obviously, I was deciding where I wanted to go to college. I was pretty set on going to FSU with my friends, or the community college in Tallahassee. And I was like, do I want to go to UNF? I can't imagine my life right now without my mom, because I'm so scared of these thoughts and I can't imagine being alone. And so I was in the middle of deciding that. And these thoughts were terrible, and I never really got rid of them. And I remember going to school, and there were times where I would be in my classroom bawling my eyes out. And I was just sitting there, and I didn't want to tell anybody because it was almost not embarrassing, but I didn't know how to explain it. I'm having this thought that's bringing me distress, but don't be worried. But also I'm scared for myself, So I would call my mom and be like, Mom, can you come to the school and just pray with me? I would just want her to come to school and pray with me. And sometimes I asked her to pick me up, but it was the second half of senior year, so things were kind of winding down. So I just felt okay leaving school, if that makes sense. So she would sometimes pick me up, sometimes she would come and just pray with me. And then I started going to therapy, I think maybe end of January, middle of January, beginning of February, sometime around then. And I went to Mandarin Christian Counseling and I saw my therapist. And I remember I walked in, and it's the first time I've ever experienced therapy before. And he was like, so what's wrong? And I was like, ah, and I just broke down and I was crying, and he was like, okay, take a deep breath. And it's always nerve-wracking to go to therapy for the first time, at least to me it was, especially since I was in a bad place to begin with. So I went to therapy about 3 times, and by the end of it, I was feeling better. I think it was beginning of March is when I went to my last therapy appointment. I went to 3 sessions, and it pretty much it didn't cure me, but it brought me the relief that I needed. So I went on the band trip, which was spring break, or right before spring break, and it was my birthday. And I remember just being like, I can't even enjoy this trip that I'm on with my best friend, her mom, and my mom. And it was my birthday, and I remember just constantly being worried about not having these thoughts. I enjoyed it. I was getting better, but I wasn't fully, my life had been altered. I hadn't thought the same since before that panic attack, if that makes sense. I was just constantly worried about having these thoughts. Mainly, I was scared that these thoughts would take over my brain. Then I got back from the band trip, and it was spring break at that point, and I was supposed to go to Sarasota with my friends, and I didn't want to go because I wanted to be with my mom. And I was scared to be not with her. And I was like, what if I had these thoughts? What if they overtake my brain? What if, I'm not with my mom to help me? And I remember during that time, during my anxiety, I was clinging to my best friend, Skylar, because she deals with anxiety and she understood what I was going through, if that makes sense. And she was very patient with me. While my other friends, I just don't think they understood to the degree that I was struggling. And that's not their fault. They had no idea. I remember having a friend going through anxiety before I did, and I remember just being like, don't think about it, you know? And I wasn't as patient with her probably because I didn't know exactly what she was going through. And I still feel bad to this day because like, I just had no idea, you know? And now like thinking back on it, when I was going through it, if people were just telling me, just don't think about it. It's like, yeah, if it was that easy, you know? So yeah, I didn't end up going on spring break. I was staying with my mom, and like that's so unlike me to not go on vacation with my friends. Like vacation and my friends, some of my two favorite things, because I wanted to stay with my mom. I was asking my mom to come pick me up from school. I just wanted her to pray with me. I was crying a lot, but it was a hard time for me, but it didn't really alter my life too much because I still was going to school. I still was doing things like I wasn't so isolated to the point where it was taking over my life, for instance. Like I think I never thought the same after that one panic attack. And I always was super cautious of like what was around me and like what would trigger me and stuff. But it didn't cripple me to the point where it did come 2021 or 2020. And then COVID happened in March. Skylar moved back. My dad was very strict about COVID. The only time I went out of the house was to go to the grocery store and to work out, but I wasn't going out to eat. I wasn't seeing any friends. I wasn't seeing my family as like my extended family. I was just with my parents a lot. And as everybody was, it was kind of an isolating time. And then in December, so let me make this point that during my senior year of high school, I was at a point where I loved going to church. I went to Thursday church. I went to Sunday church, same exact sermon. I went 2 times a week. I was so into it. I loved it. It was my favorite time of the week. Looked forward to it all the time. And it got to the point where my intrusive thoughts were triggered by church. And I would just feel terrible at church. And I would be crying and people would be coming up to me and just like hugging me and being like, I'm so sorry. And like, you know, and it was just a hard time because every time I went to church, I would have these terrible thoughts and I couldn't listen to the sermon and I was just crying and I was getting so emotional. And I remember telling my mom, and she was like, just take a week off from church. And I was like, okay. And then I took a week off. And so of course, those times that I was, you know, feeling terrible at church, I felt great that 1 week. And so I was like, I'm just not going to go to church anymore. Not a great idea, but that's part of it. So I hadn't been going to church for about, a little less than a year. Or a year. And then it got, so COVID happened in March. September, I decided I was going to go to UNF Delight, a college girls group, but I was going to do it on Zoom online because I wasn't seeing anybody in person. Remember, I was still in quarantine because of my family. That's not because of my dad, but my dad took it very seriously and I respect my parents and I, you know, stayed inside, kept them safe, you know, whatever. So I was like, I'm going to meet on Zoom with this girl for UNF Delight. I had a really bad panic attack before, but I was like, this is a spiritual attack. The enemy does not want me getting back into church and having a disciple group, and this is a spiritual attack. I was like, I don't care if I'm throwing up, if I'm crying, if I'm literally crapping my pants. I'm gonna be on this Zoom call no matter what. This is a goal of mine. So I did a Zoom call, bawling my eyes out. The girl I met with, sweetest girl ever. I knew her from grade school. I told her what I was going through. She's like, I completely understand. I'm here for you. You know, I'm praying for you. But that night after the Zoom call, I was throwing up the whole entire night. My anxiety and my intrusive thoughts were so bad that it was affecting my physical health and I was throwing up and I couldn't stop. Got no sleep that night. My mom slept with me in my room and I just was throwing up. And the next day I was like, I'm not letting this plague me. I'm going to get on my bike ride and I'm going to enjoy my day. I've seen this happen before and I'm not letting it happen again. So basically from there, it got progressively worse. I think at that point, that's when I started to like lose weight probably. I got to the point where I could only read my Bible. That's all I could do to combat the thoughts was read my Bible, and not just read it, but read it aloud. I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't listen to anything. I couldn't talk to anybody. I couldn't, just sit and be. I couldn't, all I could do was read my Bible. It got to the point where I couldn't go to the grocery store. I couldn't sleep by myself. I couldn't be at the house by myself. I had to go with my mom to every single dog visit because she was a pet sitter. I couldn't drive. I couldn't even hang out with my best friend for more than 3 hours at a time. This is like later on after December, but I'm trying to explain how bad it got for me. I couldn't shower alone. If I wanted to shave my legs, I had my mom be in the room. It got to the point where I made my mom take all the razors and the scissors in the house and hide them because I would have intrusive thoughts about them, and they would get me so distraught that if she hid them and I had no idea where they're at, I wouldn't even think about it. So, and it worked. She hid them and I didn't even think about them. I just constantly had these suicidal thoughts plaguing me all day long. And I was scared for my brain, and I was mainly scared that these thoughts would take over. And I couldn't decipher, these are intrusive thoughts. I don't want these. Stop thinking about this and let's move on. I couldn't do that in my brain. And my therapist told me it was like my lymphatic system should be right here, but it was heightened. So my brain was constantly going, and it was always thinking. And some people describe intrusive thoughts as sticky thoughts, because the more you just want to not think about them, the more you think about not thinking about them, the more that you do think about them, if that makes sense. So if you're like, don't think about this, don't think about this, don't think about this, you constantly think about it more, and it's like you're ruminating on it, So that was that. What else happened? I wasn't eating. I lost 25 pounds. I would constantly look like this. First of all, I'd be like this because I would be having thoughts and it would make me so sad, and I'd be shaking my head at all times like this. Everywhere I went, I was like, because I would have thoughts like that. I was constantly watching Tony Evans sermons, Sadie Robertson sermons. I was read my Bible. I was listening to podcasts. I felt like if I listened to a podcast that wasn't a Christian-based podcast, like I was going to have these thoughts and they were going to overtake. I wasn't going on my social media because you've heard that social media is bad for your mental health. And I was like, if I go on my social media, like I'm going to have these bad thoughts and they're going to take over my brain. What else? I was supposed to do a pet sitting job, and I had my mom come with me and completely stay with me the whole entire time I was there. There was a room, they're hunters, so they had a gun they had a gun safe like in the room, and I didn't even want to be in that room. Whenever I was cutting like apples downstairs, or I was using like a knife to like make some food or something, I made my mom be with me. I started taking anti-anxiety medication. This is later on, but I would have intrusive thoughts about the anti-anxiety medication. Heights scared me because I would have intrusive thoughts about that. Like they're all based around suicidal thoughts, if that makes sense. Like I was terrified of it. And me saying that word is like progress, because I used to not even be able to say the word. What else? I was super, super sensitive. The slightest sad things would make me bawl my eyes out. I couldn't hang out with my best friend for more than 3 hours without having my mom to come pick me up. Well, I would go over to my aunt's house on, some nights when she had church group or prayer or Bible study, and I would just have everybody, whoever was there, pray over me. And she was telling other people, they were praying for me. I felt really comfortable in my aunt's house. There was a point where I remember being on the couch and I had my laptop open and I was worshiping, hands in the air. I was like, I couldn't have been worshiping harder in my life ever. And I remember being like, I couldn't do anything besides sing these worship songs or like aloud to the top of my lungs to think about. Like, that was the only thing I could do to think, not thinking about these thoughts. And I remember having this terrible, terrible thought, the worst one I had ever had. And I remember telling my mom to take me to the hospital because I was so scared of this thought that I had. And I asked her to take me to the hospital. And I remember laying on the floor, the tile floor, and the room was spinning and it was orange. And I was like, I can't even explain how I felt. It was so terrible. And I wanted her to take me to the hospital. And she goes, if I take you to the hospital, they're going to admit you into a mental hospital. Because if you go to the hospital and you're like, having panic attacks and you're like mentally like not feeling well, like they take you to a mental hospital. And I was like, at this point, I don't even care. And she was like, are you sure? And she goes, are you sure you don't want to go to your aunt's real quick and like, see if that'll help? And I was like, you know what? You can take me to my aunt's. So my mom took me there, and I remember her breaking down and her crying and like being so scared too. And I can't even imagine from my mom's perspective what that was like, because I knew what was going on in my brain, and I knew, like, yes, it was super, super hard for me, but I can't even imagine from a mother's perspective seeing her kid like that and not knowing what to do and not being able to do anything, if that makes sense. And like, as much as she loves me and she wanted to protect me and everything, but she couldn't do anything and she couldn't take these thoughts away from me. And I remember laying in my room one day, and I was having these terrible intrusive thoughts. And I remember the family that I knew from the beginning, something that like their son or daughter did is they like hit their head on a piece of like furniture or something. And I remember having that random thought and being like, oh my gosh, and being so scared of it. And I was laying in my bed, and I was like head in the pillow. Had my sheets and my blankets covering me, and me just sitting there and being like, because I didn't want that to happen to me. And I was shaking and crying, and I would just sit there and I would be so tense like this. And that's how my life was for a good 3-4 months. And and there was one night in December, I'm hopping all over the place in the timeline, but I'm just saying, like, this is what happened to me and how bad it got. And in December, I remember one night it was like 10 p.m. and I remember calling my aunt and being like, I'm getting baptized tomorrow. Like, I'm coming over, you're dunking me in your pool. And I got up the next morning at 7 a.m. and it was cold outside. It was really cold. And my whole entire family got in the pool. My mom, my dad, my aunt, my uncle, my cousin, and they baptized me. And it was to the point where I was like, like, you couldn't even breathe in the pool because it was so cold. And they baptized me and I got dunked, and that was a good day and I felt good. And it was very minimal, the days that I felt good. And it was a scary time. I couldn't go on a run I couldn't work out. Without having these thoughts. I couldn't, go into the grocery store. I remember going down south with my parents to take care of some business, and there was this guy, it looked like he was almost like talking to himself. And I remember that like made me like break down crying. Just the smallest things I was so sensitive to. And I just really felt for people at that time. And I just because I knew I was going through a tough time, and I can't imagine like other people. And I was almost so like wondering why this is happening, because my life at the time, I had a loving family, I have friends, I have food, I have water, I have a roof over my head, I have everything I could possibly want, and I'm so blessed. And why am I feeling like this? Like, usually anxiety stems from like an area of like lack, maybe, that's what I always thought. And I was like, I'm not lacking anything. Why am I feeling like this? And I remember there's this one Bible verse I was clinging on to, and it's, consider it great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials in life, for the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete and lacking nothing. And I remember I was just clinging on to that verse, because that took my trial, my anxiety, and was turning it to a positive note. And I was like, God, one day you're going to use this for good. You are going to take this situation, and I'm going to be happy that I had it. And at this point, I can say I'm happy that I had it. But at the time, I was like, I was in the thick of it. But I knew I was going to help somebody with it one day. And I was like, you're making me mature and complete. I'm growing from this. This is something that's going to like make me a better person. And it increased my faith. And it really, I had a completely different relationship with the Lord after that. So yeah, I started going to therapy again. I was like off and on deciding, do I want to go to therapy? Do I not? Between November and January, I was like, I'm having a really good day. I'm having a really bad day. I want to go to therapy. Having a really good day. I don't want to go. On and off, on and off. Decided end of January, I'm going to therapy. He said, I really think you'd benefit from medication. And I was like, oh, heck no. I was like, I don't do medication. Like, not like that. Nope. And then he was like, I really think it would do a 180 for you. And I was like, well, right now I'm really struggling, so I guess I'll go to a psychiatrist. So I went to a psychiatrist, and one thing about a psychiatrist is they're very cold. I wanted to maybe be warm and fuzzy and understand what I'm going through and like, you know, feel for me. And like, no, this man was like, tell me what's going on. And I was just crying. He was like, can you please just tell me? And I was like, oh, whoa, okay. He diagnosed me with anxiety and obsessive compulsive thinking. And I ended up getting a prescription for medication. I got an SSRI and I got a benzo. And he was like, we'll only be on the benzo for a little bit amount of time because that'll relieve some of the anxiety that you're feeling before the SSRI kicks in, because it can take up to 3 months before you can fully feel its effect. And he was like, but like, I'm just like, disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, and I'm just trying to remember best I can from what he said about a year ago, more than a year ago. I think he said that benzos can have addictive properties in it, or it can be addictive to some people. So he didn't want me being on it for a long time. But he said that's a small population, so like he wasn't worried about it. But I was like, addiction? Like I was like, nope, I'm scared of that. So I was like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna do the SSRI. I'm gonna wait for it to kick in about 3 months. I can handle this. And then I read all the directions about the medication for the SSRI. My, what is it? What am I taking? Paxil. The first side effect or warning was it could cause suicidal thoughts. And I was like, nope, that is what I'm most scared of in this life. No, absolutely not. So I was like, I'm not taking it. And at this time I was like, do I take it? Do I not? I had people praying for me, trying to give me like a good, like I was asking the Lord for clarity in it. And then I went to therapy and he was like, I really, 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 really highly consider it. I think it would really benefit you. So I ended up taking it, and that's when things really started to turn around, is when I got medicine for it. It was a really tough time, as you can imagine. The Lord heals in many ways. In some ways are medicine, and the Lord gives us doctors and he gives us medicine, and you are not lacking faith by going on medication. Because that's what I thought at one point. Am I not like completely giving this to the Lord? Am I using something else to heal me? But no, God healed me through medication, through doctors, you know? And I'm so thankful for that, and it increased my faith and it grew my relationship with him, and it really like allowed me to lean on him in a time of trouble. My point of making this video is because I want to help somebody feel a little less alone. Or if you take anything from this, I mean, that's just my story about it. I have many things that have helped me through it, exactly, like besides the medication, things that helped me before, like tips and tricks that I used, I guess. Or if you have any questions, I guess. That was me kind of just telling my story about it. But there's many other things that, like, I'm sure I'm gonna watch this video back and be like, wow, I missed a lot. This stuff isn't really plaguing me. Obviously I have some thoughts, but I'm able to decipher them as intrusive thoughts, and those aren't things that I want, and I never did want them all along. That's my journey with intrusive thoughts and anxiety and obsessive compulsive thinking. And if you're going through this, you are not alone. I want to say that one. God knows exactly what you're thinking. He knows the thoughts in your mind. He knows when the beginning of this was. He knows when the end of it's going to be. He knows that you are going through it, and he's walking with you every step of the way. I promise you. And diving into his word and is really, really what, like, that's all that I knew how to do when I was having these terrible thoughts. So I encourage you to read your Bible, speak it out loud, speak words over your thoughts, and don't claim these intrusive thoughts as yours, because they're not yours. They're not yours. Yeah, if you have any questions or anything, just let me know. That's my story, and I hope y'all have a good day.